What's up, guys? This is Kyurem for the Trinity of Lift, and today I bring all of you guys my Chaos Shaddoll deck profile, updated for the Secrets of Eternity. This deck, I finally was able to update it. I finally got all the new cards in that I needed, and I was able to update it for all of you guys, and I'm happy to share with you my updated list. So let's get right into it. First up, we do play 3 Shaddoll Squamata. This guy is probably the most efficient and most used Shaddoll in my entire Shaddoll lineup, primarily because he does get us our deck thinning effects, as well as there is some pretty nutty combos that you can do with him when you make a Nephilim. So I like to see 3 of them as much as I can. I will always keep using his effect in almost every duel, so having the 3 so I always have that effect axis is always spectacular. Next up, we do play 2 Shaddoll Beast. I cut one from my last list, primarily because although Beast has a great effect and that free +1 every time he's sent to the grave by an effect, I've been finding myself dead drawing him much more often than I would like. I would draw into him sometimes at multiple copies even, and at times never have a fusion to get him out of my hand. So having only 2 right now is fine with me. I don't see him as often, and if I ever do see him, he's usually not as dead as he was previously. So I'm liking the ratio of 2 beasts right now, and I'm probably going to stick with it for a while. Next up, we do play a fairly standard Shaddoll lineup from there. We play the 2 Dragon for our back row removal, or if we ever have to bounce a card, if we do resolve its flip effect. We then play 2 Shaddoll Falco. We use it obviously to either revive itself or revive another Shaddoll from our grave, as well as he's our level 2 tuner of the deck. And then finally, for the last 2 Shaddolls, we do play 2 Shaddoll Hedgehog. This guy, he searches for our spell or traps, or he searches for a monster whenever we need it. He's always a great card to have early game, and I still only run 2, primarily because in late game he really doesn't do much, so I just run the 2 so I can see him as early as possible, but not become too dead in the late game. Next up, for the supporting cast of monsters, we do still play 3 Denko Sekka. Denko is still ridiculous in this deck, since you are very OTK based. Having the 3 Denko Sekka to enable your OTKs and never have to worry about back row is always good, as it really helps you win those games more often than not. And she is always pretty much kind of like your safety net whenever you are pushing for the damage. So yeah, 3 Denko Sekka. Next up, since this is the Chaos Dragon build of Shaddolls, we do play the 3 White Dragon Wyverburster, as well as the 1 Collapse Serpent. I like this ratio of 3-1 now, primarily because, firstly, on Collapse Serpent, he doesn't serve as much of a purpose within the deck, outside of maybe just using him for Synchro fodder, or using him for our XYZ fodder. And outside of that, he is extremely lackluster, because he is a dark, and we don't per se will go into our El Shaddoll windows as often as our El Shaddoll Nephilims. So having just the 1, just in case for whatever we might need him for, is fine with me. And we still do run the 3 Wyverburster because it is the light one out of the 2. And since we will be going into our El Shaddoll Nephilims more often than not, we like having the 3 for our light fodder. So that's it for the Chaos Dragons. Next up, we do run I guess you could say a mini Earth Engine, in the sense that it's 2 Mathematician and 1 Glow Up Bulb now. Like I said before, I like the 2 Mathematician because 2 is frankly a good ratio for me, as I like to see him often enough with the 2, where he doesn't clog as much as 3 previously did. So I still do run the 1, or not the 1, excuse me, the 2 Mathematician. And then for the 1 Glow Up Bulb, we do run that 1 Glow Up Bulb as Earth Fodder for our Shekinaga, as well as having easy level 1 tuning access. And there's also a pretty cool combo with Glow Up Bulb into Shekinaga that I can talk to you guys about in a second. Finally, for the last monster, we do still play the 1 Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning, because the whole deck is pretty much only darks or lights with the exception of the 3 Earth monsters, so we still can run the BLS because it's extremely powerful. Next up, for the spells, we run 3 Shaddoll Fusion and 3 El Shaddoll Fusion. I bumped up the ratio to 3-3 now because I really started missing the third Shaddoll fusion in my previous build, so I decided to bump it up to 3 just so I can see it more often. Then I can go into my big power plays almost immediately. And so I like this ratio now of 3-3 because although you might have times when you have a load of dead fusions in hand, usually if that's the case, you probably are in a losing situation anyway. So just having the 3-3 just to see them as often as you possibly can is still great. Next up for our last Shaddoll Fusion S card, we do play the one Nef Shaddoll Fusion, straight from the newest set. With this card, I'm able to consistently make El Shadow Gristas whenever I might need him. And also, it's an equip spell card, which there's some pretty cool cards, or a pretty cool card, I should say, coming down in the list that I like to use in tandem with Nef Shaddoll Fusion if I ever have to. So having the one Nef Shaddoll Fusion for our 7th fusion, it's helpful as it bumps up the fusion count, as well as I like the amount 7, just because it's fairly enough where I don't keep drawing it to multiple copies when I only might need 1 or 2. And also, frankly, having again that easy access to Grista or whatever attribute fusion you might need is always good and helps with the versatility of the deck. Next up, we still play the 2 MST. For the love of God, I cannot find room for the third one. I really wish I could find room for the third MST because I know how big Cleaforts are and how back row is still sort of a thing. So it kind of bums me out that I don't have the room, but I still run the 2 MST because I frankly find that you have to. I usually will start in the third MST in most of my matches, so that's kind of how I alleviate no room in the main deck, but whatever. It's been working fine for me so far. Next up, we do play 2 copies of Enemy Controller. Enemy Controller is still a very disruptive card in this format, and having the ability to basically steal any of your opponent's monsters if you do tribute one of your own fusions and then float the fusion spell card back, it's always a very strong play because you can disrupt your opponent as well as get another live fusion probably next turn. Next up, the rest of the spells are all just one-ofs. We do play the 1 Snatch Steal. Snatch Steal is still a great card, and I still find that almost every deck should run Snatch Steal. Shaddolls especially, because a majority of the decks that are in meta now, their monsters can be used for fusion summons for our own monsters, and since Super Polymerization is on the ban list now, we kind of have the Snatch Steal sort of as a pseudo Super Poly, but also when we want to clear the opponent's board and push for damage. Having the Snatch Steal to basically steal our opponent's only monster and then hitting for game is always a very satisfying feeling. Next up, we play 1 Hidden Armory. Hidden Armory is here just so I can recruit that Snatch Steal as early as possible. I try and refrain from using it to grab Nef Shaddoll Fusion, primarily because how Nef Shaddoll Fusion works with this deck. You have to have a Shaddoll on board to equip it to. So, since you are giving up your normal summon for Hidden Armory, I find that at times, if I ever have to search the Nef Shaddoll Fusion, I have to hope that my board is already set up where Nef Shaddoll Fusion is live. Because if not, I cannot normal summon a Shaddoll to make the Nef Shaddoll Fusion live, which is why I try and refrain from searching it. This is primarily going to act as either our recruitment for Nef Shaddoll Fusion from the grave, if we ever find the need for it before we can float it back, and it's our second copy of Snatch Steal. Finally, for the last spell cards, we play 1 Book of Moon because Book is a great defensive and offensive card, and I find that almost every deck should also run Book of Moon. We do play the 1 Foolish Burial because this can essentially be any Shaddoll monster that we might want or need at any given time. And this is sort of the fill-in for our 3rd Mathematician. And then finally, we do play the 1 Raigeki because this is an OTK-based deck. Having the Raigeki to clear the opponent's board and then hitting for game is always the best way to do it, in my opinion, because it makes so much salt happen with this Raigeki. So, finally now, for the last 2 cards of the deck is our only 2 traps. We do play 2 Shaddoll Core. Core has, surprisingly enough, been much better ever since Nef Shaddoll Fusion came out, because previously I used to rely on Core only as sort of a monster, I should say, when I had to stall, or also to help me recruit fusions. But now with Nef Shaddoll Fusion and Core, you can actually, a pretty funny thing that you can do is actually equip Nef Shaddoll Fusion onto Shaddoll Core. So having that weird interaction, as well as having Core's ability to keep recruiting and recycling your spells from grave, is always a powerful effect. As well as there's also a pretty nutty combo that I should tell you guys about right now that involves Shaddoll Skomata and your El Shaddoll Nephilim. If you make a Nephilim with a Skomata and whatever else Light Fodder you might use, you can use both Skomata and Nephilim's effect to send Core and another Shaddoll Fusion that you did not use this turn. And then Core will activate and immediately let you recycle that one fusion you just sent back to your hand. So I like to combo this with like, oh, make El Shaddoll Nephilim with Shaddoll Fusion, send those to the Core and the El Shaddoll Fusion, and then activate Core to pull that El Shaddoll Fusion, and then have basically my OTK plays ready to go. So that's why Core, in my opinion, has greatly improved over this couple weeks, and I still like the two. So that's it for the main deck. On to the extra deck. We still do play the 3 El Shaddoll Nephilim. Nephilim is still ridiculous, having the Catastor effect, having the float effect, having her 2.8k body. What's not to love about her? Seriously, she is by far my favorite El Shaddoll, and I go into her the most often, like most Shaddoll players will, because you do have the lights, and you do have a lot of lights and darks. Well, not darks, but you do have a lot of lights and Shaddolls to make her as often as you need. Next up, we do still play the 2 El Shaddoll window, primarily for something like the Burning Abyss or the Satellar Knight matchup. She is your sort of pseudo floodgate in that sense. But outside of those matchups, you really won't be using her all that much. So having the 2 just enough for those 2 matchups, like I said before, is good enough. And having, again, that pseudo floodgate in your extra deck is always something great to go into. Next up, we do play 2 El Shaddoll Shekinaga. Since I did bump up the Earths from 2 to 3 now, I've been able to actually go into Shekinaga quite often, more than I was before. So I have bumped her up to 2 because there is also a pretty cool combo with her and Glow Up Bulb that I should tell you about now. Frankly, if you make her with Glow Up Bulb and any Shaddoll, you essentially can make a Star Eater for free, because when you send Glow Up Bulb with the fusion to the grave, you can then activate Glow Up Bulb, resummon it after milling a card, and then make a Star Eater with Glow Up Bulb and Shekinaga. And then after that, Shekinaga will activate, pulling you the fusion that you probably used to make her, and pull it back to your hand. So with that, she's very good, as well as having that Trap Tricks Trap Hole effect helps stop a lot of decks. So yeah, 2 Shekinaga. And then finally, we do have the 1 El Shaddoll Grista. Thank the Lord, I can finally make this quite often now when I need to, with both the 2 cores and the Nef Shaddoll fusion now. Having, well, easily accessible Gristas to stop your opponent's special summoning is very strong, as a walking solemn warning with a fairly big 24.5 or 2.45k body is very good. So yeah, we do play the 1 El Shaddoll Grista. Next up for the Synchro, starting us off, we have the 1 Star Eater. Like I said before, you basically can make Star Eater for free with Shekinaga and Glow Up Bulb. And when you can make Star Eater, why wouldn't you want to make Star Eater? Star Eater still has a ridiculous effect and really can get over a lot of things in this format. Next up, we play the 1 Leo. Leo is still a great card in this format. Not being able to be targeted majority of the time is always great. And you can make this off of either, but you can make this off of a Falco and a Nephilim. And just like the Shekinaga combo I just talked about, you can use Nephilim's effect to float back a fusion and then probably have another fusion on board accompanying Leo. And that's a pretty scary board, let me tell you. So yeah, 1 Leo. For our 1 level 7 Synchro, we do only play the single Arcanite Magician now. I did since cut Yazzie and Black Rose from my last list. Yazzie, primarily because I felt like, although I do go into it at times, it doesn't help me progress my game state as much as I'd like to. And where it kind of just becomes just a 2.6k stick. And frankly, I found that Arcanite Magician does way more than just stick people for damage, because obviously it can do that destruction effect with its 2 spell counters. So that's why I like that 1 Arcanite Magician. As well as I have this card over Black Rose Dragon, primarily because Black Rose Dragon nukes the board, while Arcanite Magician gives me power over what I might want to destroy. There are times when I'd rather destroy only specific cards rather than the whole board, and then having Arcanite Magician just so I can, rather than not haphazardly blow up the board, is very good in my opinion, as well as is often overlooked that Arcanite Magician is also a light monster. So after we use its effect, we can also use it for our light fodder for our Nephilim plays. So that's also why I do run it over Black Rose, because Black Rose is a fire and, well, we can't ever really use it for a fusion. So that's why I have the 1 Arcanite over it. Next up for the 1 level 6 Synchro, we do have the 1 Goyo Guardian. Having the Goyo to always steal our monsters is always a nice effect, and possibly either using that monster that we might have stolen to either Synchro up, fuse, or overlay it with is always good, because then it essentially robs our opponent of that 1 monster for quite some time. And then we do play the 1 Armades now. Armades, I've been seeing myself go into a lot more now that I do run Glow Up Bulb. And since I do have quite a few level 4s in the form of the Chaos Dragons, as well as some of the Shaddoll monsters, I've been seeing myself want to go into it more often with Bulb in one of the level 4s. And Armades is always good in stuff like the Mirror Match, or just stuff in general, because they cannot activate their effects until after damage step. So having that Armades for whenever we might need it in the mirror or whatnot is always good. Then moving on to the XYZs, we do play the 1 Castell, because Castell is still a great card. Spinning things back to deck is always a great effect, and very reminiscent of my love for Madolchi Queen Tiramisu, actually, which is pretty funny. So having kind of a pseudo Tiramisu, I should say, always tickles my funny bone and just really floats my boat. So yeah, 1 Castell. And then finally, for the last extra deck monster, we do play the 1 Downard Magician. Downard is here because you can either make it with 2 level 4 main deck Shaddoll monsters, or the primary use I see it have is that whenever you might steal your opponent's Dante with either enemy controller or Snatch Steal, you can use Downard Magician to straight overlay over that Dante, so your opponent doesn't get back their Dante in some way, as well as it's harder for them to get their floating effect, because now it's underneath Downard Magician. Also, the prospect of having a free 2.7k Downard is never a bad thing, because you can always just pierce stuff for game if you ever have the need for it. So yeah, guys, that's it for my Chaos Shaddoll deck profile. Please tell me what you guys think of this list down in the comment section below. And as always, guys, this is Kyurem from the Trinity of Lift, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.